Andrea Leadsom.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this important debate today, following the publication of Gemma White QC's report last week. And I would first like to pay tribute to her for the incredibly detailed independent inquiry that she led. Her report into the historic allegations of bullying and harassment of MPs' staff adds greatly to the work done by the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme Working Group, and will drive much-needed further reforms in the way we treat and value all those who work for and support us in our roles as MPs. I'd also like to acknowledge all those current and former staff members who contributed their experiences to the inquiry and helped expose behaviours that have clearly gone on for far too long in this place. I met Gemma White during my time as Leader of the House and found her to be both very knowledgeable and determinedly constructive in supporting Parliament's own desire to modernise our practices. Her report highlights the need for everyone working in or visiting Parliament to be treated with dignity and respect. But she also highlighted some truly unacceptable employment practices, and I was appalled, as I'm sure were colleagues from all sides of the House, to read some of the comments from staff. As part of my work in chairing the ICGS working group, I heard some pretty harrowing testimony from several individuals, and I do want to pay tribute to them for their bravery in coming forward to speak with the group. It's clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we in Parliament must bring about long-lasting and positive institutional change without delay, and change must come from the very top. Only then can we truly restore confidence in the way we work in Parliament. The report does acknowledge that the ICGS provides MP staff for the first time with a mechanism for having complaints of bullying and harassment independently investigated. Feedback from some of the first complainants is that turnaround times under the new procedure can be too slow, and so my first observation is that the scheme is still developing, and it's important that we allow it time to become fully embedded into the fabric of Westminster. I know that the staff working for the scheme are all fully committed to continuous improvements in the processes. Secondly, I'm glad that the White Report agrees that employment relationships should continue to sit with individual MPs, and I do fully agree with the recommendation of a centralised human resources function for MP staff. The question of who would have responsibility for a new HR function does need to be considered further, however, although the two obvious candidates would be either IPSA or the House authorities themselves. The former, I'm sorry to say, currently suffers from fairly widespread feedback from member staff about a lack of confidence in the practices of IPSA and hence in its ability to be the supportive voice that staff members need. The other alternative provider of HR for staff would be the House authorities themselves. Now, during the working group, Madam Deputy Speaker, they raised concerns about taking on an HR role for themselves because it could create an unhelpful secondary employment relationship. But I do think it would be worthwhile looking again at whether that could be the best way forward. A key aspect of the White Report is that many current staff still feel uncomfortable about making complaints. And what we need to do to assure them is that the working group focus specifically on ensuring that as far as possible an individual's career will not be affected in any way if they come forward with a complaint. That's why the ICGS carries out any investigation in strict confidence, and so I do urge anyone with a grievance or a complaint to be encouraged to come forward via the helplines that have been widely advertised around the estate. And then, as part of the scope of the working group, it was recommended that a wide range of training should be available to MPs and to their staff. The White Report recommends making some of that training mandatory in order to bring about institutional behavioural change, and I totally agree. I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that all MPs and all staff working for MPs should now be required to undertake at least the Valuing Others training that was implemented as part of the ICGS, and I call on each of the Whip's offices to make sure that their MPs have completed the training within 6 months of the publication of this report. I'll give way and then to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to her. One of the things when you arrive working for a Member of Parliament here, perhaps straight out of university, is that your employer may be your first employer. So all the bad ways that you learn from them then become the bad ways that you get into in later life, and perhaps when you later go on to become either working as an MP or elsewhere in the service. Isn't it therefore all the more important that from the moment somebody arrives here as a Member of Parliament, they are trained in best practice in human resources?
Yes, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and of course, as he who's followed this very closely will recall, that during the working group investigations, it was very clear that we needed to take things a bit slowly and to not push for too much change too quickly. But what's also apparent is that Parliament has come to value its own progress, its own modernisation of practices and so on. And so I do think we can move much faster now than was thought at the time back in late 2017. So I do think it's right that people should undertake mandatory training, particularly if they are going to be employing staff who themselves may be coming into their first job. I give way to my honourable friend.
Honourable friend for giving way. I just wondered if she had a view as to why so few MPs had taken up the opportunity of the training. 34 out of 650 MPs, or 135 out of 3,200 staff. I mean, these are tiny numbers.
Well, I'm glad that my honourable friend raises that point, because, of course, the truth is that the training's actually only been up and running properly for the last couple of months. So an awful lot of work went into procuring the training providers, and also we needed to find a training provider that could deal with the sheer volume of people who would need to undertake the training, and then the training course itself was written specifically to be relevant to our working practices in Parliament. So I and a number of other people who were closely involved with the independent complaints procedure establishment went on that training only about 7 weeks ago to sort of beta test it, to make sure that it was entirely relevant and that it would be relevant and useful and welcomed. And so that has been done. So it is a bit unfair to say, well, why hasn't everybody done it? You know, there really genuinely is a capacity issue, but it does seem to me that if all whips now were to encourage members to go on that valuing others training within the next 6 months, and then all staff to undertake it within a year from now, it should be doable, and I certainly think it would be valuable. And I also believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that with so many people working on the parliamentary estate, the centrally organised induction course that already exists should be made mandatory for all new starters and should be completed within 3 months of joining. There is no other major organisation that would allow a new member of staff to come into such a huge and complex institution, let alone a building that's kind of semi-falling down, without being compulsorily trained on things like health and safety, cyber security, fire safety, let alone on the behaviour code and how to raise a complaint or a grievance. So I do think compulsory induction training, and it would be easy to implement that, and I know that the Director-General and the Clerk of the Commons are keen to oversee that. It could be easily done by simply giving any new joiner a parliamentary pass that lasts for 3 months and is then renewed subject to them having completed the induction course. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was proud as leader to host visits from the Canadian and Australian parliaments and to meet with the Scottish presiding officer and the Llywelyn in Wales to answer questions from them about how we here in Westminster are determined to achieve a change in our culture. We here should be ambitious to be a role model for all parliaments around the world, confident in our determination to always treat everyone who works here or visits here with the dignity and respect that they deserve. Thank you.
Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the former Leader of the House, and I want to acknowledge the significant amount of work that she did to drive all of this forward.